People play games to have fun. Well, some people might only play to get mad, but for the most part, the point of video games is to create an enjoyable experience. So maybe this is why so many people are opposed to the idea of time constraints in video games. The clock ticking down on you, the feeling that you're not going fast enough, the frantic soundtrack blasting in your ears. It's easy to see why this system can trouble some people. And although time limits can cause the player to feel a certain amount of stress, it's the stress that can lead to a different and more enjoyable experience. The most important thing to think about when looking at time limits is the mindset of the player in these situations. See, the most that a player has at stake when they fail is the loss of their precious time. But if you ask anyone what they felt when Sonic was about to drown, they'll probably say that more was at stake than the few minutes it takes to redo the level. So let's take a look at how time in games affects the mindset of a player, for better or for worse, and how it can lead to having more fun in a game. First, let's take a look at the system used in an obscure little NES game called Super Mario Bros. And let's do a hypothetical here. Say your brother is being a butt and he tells you to keep him alive while he goes do stupid brother things. You want to kill him, but oh no, you just gotten Permastar invincibility. Well, don't fret, because you can actually still die in two ways. You can fall into a bottomless pit, or you can do literally nothing and let time run out. Let's focus on the latter because it's in the title of the video. From a lore standpoint, you could think of it as Mario's urgency to rescue the princess from the lizard monarch thing before something bad happens to her. From a pseudo-arcade standpoint, you could think of it as a regulation on the time a player can spend on one playthrough, while also rewarding you with points for going faster if that's your jam. But most importantly, it means you, the player, might go faster than you would without a time limit. Unless you're familiar with the game, you won't know when the level ends, prompting you to go as fast as you're willing, as though an invisible wall of death were approaching from behind. Compare that to the slower, time-limitless style of Mega Man, where you have to stop, observe, and then act, instead of trying to rush to the end. Many of the 2D Mario games will actually play a little jingle to alert you to time running low, and will even speed up the tempo of the soundtrack. As anyone who's loitered around on a level will tell you, these things serve as both a helpful reminder and a stress inducer. But even though this is all true, Mario timers tend to be pretty generous. Although Super Luigi Bros. U is designed so that every level is fairly short with a pretty tight time limit to match. A great example of this countdown mechanic is from another Nintendo property, Wario Land 4. Each level is actually split into two parts, exploring until you find the frog pedestal, and then backtracking to the start. The first half is untimed and has some groovy tunes, but once you hit the frog, everything changes. Wario shouts, "Hurry up!" A giant timer appears on screen and it's already ticking down. The music goes haywire, the world shakes and shifts colors at random. If you wait till the end, good luck. It honestly feels like you're playing two different games, even though they take you through the very same level with similar challenges, all because of a timer. And speaking of timers changing the feel of a game, some games make sure they don't do that by having the entire game revolve around a constant timer, just like the shrinking hourglass that is mortality. Dead Rising has a time limit to complete the game, and it also has story events that can only be activated at certain times, making it nearly impossible to do everything there is in one playthrough. Perfectionists who take things at their own pace will be faced with vanishing opportunities. On the other hand, a speedy player might find themselves twiddling their thumbs waiting for the next thing to happen, but maybe that's the point. Frank West's profession as a reporter should be a good indicator that the news isn't able to portray the full story of what happens to Williamette. And this comes across in the game as the player being unable to do everything without some prior knowledge or experience. This narration is lost in the sequels, but you get the idea. On the other side of the tone spectrum, Pikmin is a deceptively relaxing game that also has a shroud of impending doom hanging above your head the whole time. To start, there is this overarching limit of 30 endgame days in which Olimar has to get 30 ship parts. This is pretty clever game design as it makes the player believe that beating the game is as simple as collecting a part a day. And sure, yeah, that can work, but what if you miss a day? Suddenly you've got to work double hard the next day so that you can keep pace, but on the other hand, if you manage to get more than one part in a day, you get to breathe a sigh of relief for a little bit. Then within that, each day is hard capped at about 13 minutes in length. That's about 6.5 hours of actual game time to essentially raise your army from nothing, locate and retrieve ship parts, and defeat every enemy and obstacle that stands in your way. This approach makes players strive to be efficient and rewards careful planning. The sequel, Pikmin 2, on the other hand, removes this 30-day limit and also freezes the clock while spelunking in dungeons which make up the bulk of the game. As a result, the game feels far less urgent, allowing for a more exploratory and slow experience. Whether this is better or not is up to personal preference, as even the original's limitations still allow for plenty of time. But what I can objectively say is that the original's time limit makes the player, subconsciously, step out of their comfort zone in order to ensure that they can finish the game in time. Now, one of the biggest side effects of this kind of system is that it artificially gates your exploration of the game world. There just isn't enough time for you to explore without being pushed to the brink of time. This really incentivizes gaining a strong grasp of the map and having a handle on how you spend your time. A good example of this would be Chibirobo. While you didn't necessarily have a timer, you did have a battery life, which ticked down whenever you did anything, and the only way to replenish it was by finding an outlet which would effectively end your day. This unique form of a timer really emphasizes what I was talking about, as it encourages you to be aware of your surroundings and to make sure you knew the quickest way to an outlet. Plus, it always has you second guessing whether or not you should explore a new area or play it safe. There's always the question of whether or not there's an outlet in the next area and if you should risk your battery life finding it. Now, while the games I mentioned prior to this point like to have timers ever present within their games, most of the times games tend to time specific segments or missions. You see, time can be used to add suspense or difficulty to an otherwise simple task, or to make an already difficult objective into a crazy difficult one. Take this mission from Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4. You have to find all the channel gaps. Simple enough, but it has a timer on it, and if it's your first attempt, you might have to retry a couple times because you can't finish it fast enough. The developers make the players feel as if the stakes are way higher than they actually are, and create an experience that sticks out much more in the player's memory. These types of time elements in certain sections create an illusion that the players are pitted against a greater foe, even if that's not truly the case. There's actually a bunch of quotes from the Portal developers that help illustrate this mindset change in the player. So, I've been talking about those time limits that have that sense of finality to it, whether it be the end of that life, the end of one of your tries, or just straight up the end of your game. But now I'm going to talk about those time limits that don't end everything and instead give you a very gentle nudge to hurry it up. When these games decide that you've been lingering around for too long for whatever reason, they send the physical manifestation of death to encourage you to get a move on. The best example of this that I can think of is Spelunky, where if you stay in any given level for more than 2 minutes, you'll notice the music slow down and get real spooky. And if you didn't take that as your cue to leave, then a friendly ghost hones in at your position to usher you to the exit, or your death, whatever comes first. But a big part of this type of system is that it can add a bigger challenge to the game, sometimes even with a bigger reward. Thrasher has this, as you can get much more points doing rad tricks while the coppers are on your tail. And I would say Persona and Reciteer, but beating the crap out of mechanics is required for 100% completion. In fact, in Spelunky, if the ghost passes any gems, they turn super valuable, making it invaluable to dance around death in order to gain high scores. All in all, I feel that this is the best mechanic for people who really don't like time limits because it doesn't actually mean the end. It could come with some cool gameplay elements and teaches you that grinding is the devil. I don't really know if I made any convincing arguments, but time is ticking and it's time for this video to come to a close. Honestly, I fucking hate time limits, but don't let that stop you from telling me your favorite implementation of time in video games. And while you're down there, be sure to take your time and like and subscribe. But before that, have a good day.